Well, welcome everybody tonight. I'm hoping that tonight will be very beneficial for you. I welcome questions, and I really do welcome questions. I welcome them during this time while I'm speaking, and I also welcome them after this is over. If there's something I can do to help you, if you have questions about adhesives or what you're doing or what's happening, if I can be of assistance in any way, please reach out to me. One of the things that I really enjoy about this opportunity to speak with people is the opportunity to improve dentistry more than just the dentistry that I do. I'm a full-time practicing dentist. I practice here in South Jordan, and I love helping people. So you can see my email. I'm not much of an Instagrammer, but if you reach out to me on Instagram, I will get it and I will respond. So I welcome your questions. I happen to live in South Jordan, Utah, which is the same place that Ultradent's headquarters are located, and I had the opportunity to work in their R&D department for about 17 years. And I also have been presenting on various subjects in restorative dentistry, specifically with adhesives and bonding, largely based on the fact that I had an opportunity that was very unusual for a general dentist at Ultradent, and that was to do a lot of testing with adhesives. So I am receiving an honorarium from them tonight as I continue to work with them and for them, but I adore Ultradent and think very highly of their products. So let's talk about bond strength. So we all learned in dental school that when you're placing an amalgam stays where it's at because of retentive cuts that we make in the teeth. So we place the silver filling and it stays there because of that mechanical retention in there. There is no adhesive placed, there's no bonding. And so our bond strengths are essentially zero on amalgam because we have mechanical retention. So when it comes to something like amalgams, bond strength is not needed because of that mechanical retention. Well, what about crowns? If you do a crown prep and you have really parallel walls and you've got good wall height and you've got good material and you made a good impression or a good scan, you end up with really not much in the way of gap in between your tooth and your crown. And so it doesn't take a whole lot of bond strength to hold a permanent crown on a tooth. And if you've been practicing for very long, you know that. When I was a new dentist many years ago, I placed a permanent crown on a tooth with temporary cement at the suggestion of a patient, thinking that we would be able to remove that crown a short time later, evaluating if the tooth needed endo or not. And I cemented the crown with temporary cement. And as I'm sure many of you are smiling right now and know that that crown stayed there for many years because temporary cement bond strength was plenty to hold that crown on there. But what about in a situation like this? So you've got a mandibular incisor, you're going to try and put a composite right on that edge. And what kind of bond strength do you want here? And in my practice, I can't get too much bond strength in this situation. This is a patient that I saw. And the reason that I saw this patient is because I was chatting with his wife before I ever met him. And she was talking about how frustrated he was that he had been to the dentist so many times and had a restoration placed in this location and how many times it had broken off. And given my history at Ultradent and the things that I had learned about adhesives and bond strength, this patient came to me and I was able to place a resin here, and it has stayed for many years. And that's based on the things that I've learned. So in this situation, if you were doing this at your practice, how much bond strength would you want? Is it possible to have too much? When we talk about adhesives and when we talk about bond strengths, we talk about them in MPa. MPa stands for megapascals. And it's important that we understand what that is. So if you take a slow speed burr shaft, like you can see in the picture here, and you were to cut that off and you were to glue that onto a wall, just a flush surface, that slow speed burr shaft against a flush surface wall, and you hung 1 pound on it and then it broke off, that would equate to 1 MPa. Or if you were able to hang 30 pounds on it before it broke off, that would be 30 MPa, or 50 pounds would be 50 MPa. So it's important that we understand that when we talk about adhesives and when we talk about bonding, we always talk in MPa, because that is the measurement that is used, and it's important that we understand what that is. So one of the questions that I think is really important, is how strong are teeth? And when I was at dental school at Loma Linda way back in the day, I have a good friend by the name of Neil Jessup, and he was working in the research department there at Loma Linda. And one of the things that he did is he took human teeth and embedded them in acrylic and then ground them down on a lathe until he had a piece of dentin that is the size of a slow speed burr shaft. And then he would put it in a device similar to the device that you see here and screw that little set screw on the top so that piece of acrylic would hold very tight and would not move. And then he would put it inside this other device, which is designed to make sure that the forces that are applied to that piece of tooth to measure how strong teeth are is in a direct line. If you put it on an Instron machine without this device, you get some flex in the machine, and you end up with some really funky numbers. And so he spent a lot of time working on this and developing it, this slide device that is used is a critical role. The next thing that you do is he put them in, this is called an Instron machine. And if you look at the machine on, I'm hoping it's your left side. As I'm looking at it, it's the left side, but there's a head with an aluminum shaft that comes down and puts pressure on that slide, which is then resting on that little button of tooth. And as you push that button, it continues to slide down and increase slowly the amount of pressure that's put on it until it breaks off. And what he found is that human dentin is somewhere between 70 and 100 MPa. So if you think about that little slow speed burr shaft attached, glued onto a wall or sticking out from a wall, you could hang 70 to 100 pounds on that dentin before it would break off. And I think sometimes we as dentists, we don't recognize just how strong dentin is. And I think that's largely because so often when we're dealing with dentin, we are removing carious dentin, which is obviously not strong at all. And we just pull that out of there and, kind of scoop that out of there with a slow speed burr or with a spoon or however you choose to remove it. But good, solid, healthy dentin is extremely strong. The other thing that we know is that the DEJ is somewhere between 60 and 70 MPa. So the creator, nature, however you want to view it, has attached enamel and dentin at 60 to 70 MPa, which you think about that, 60 pounds on that one little slow speed burr shaft of tooth, it really is resilient and really strong things. Well, one of the things that we can do, and one of the things that I had the opportunity to do a lot of at Ultradent, was test adhesives. So what we would do is we would get human teeth that Ultradent collects through what they call a tooth fairy system. They have a system where if you send them a human tooth to their office, they will then give you a $1 credit at Ultradent for buying products. And they've had this system in place for a long time, and they get lots of teeth, lots of wisdom teeth. And so they just have these large buckets of human teeth over at Ultradent. And I was given free rein to do as many tests as I wanted to do. So you would take human dentin, you would put a human tooth inside this acrylic and then grind that down on a lathe until you get this fresh cut surface that you can then apply adhesives to. And then you apply the adhesive to the tooth according to the manufacturer's instructions of whatever adhesive that you're using. And then you put it in this device. And if you look at this device, I'm showing a finished product here, but that little white disc that is at the top of that black device, there's a hole on the inside of that. So you would place your adhesive on the tooth, you would thin it and dry it and light cure it, and then you would put that sample underneath that white disc. And then you would screw the little wing nuts down and you would have a nice slow speed burr shaft slot that you could then place composite down into, light cure that, and then lift that off. And what this does is this gives us that slow speed burr shaft piece of composite that is glued to a tooth with adhesive. And then we can put it back in this same device and we can apply pressure to it. And as we break those off, we can test the strength of adhesives. And because of my affiliation with Ultradent, I had the opportunity to do this, and I was given free range to do this on as many teeth with as many adhesives as I wanted, with the understanding that whatever my results were, that I had the opportunity to share that with anybody and everybody that would listen to me. And there were no hesitations and no restrictions placed on me at all. The reason I included this ISO stamp is to talk about the fact that this system that I've just explained, this is the ISO standard for the way that this test is to be done. So there's lots of different ways to test adhesives, and there's lots of different ways to do shear strength tests and tensile strength tests, but this Ultradent and Neil Jessup has worked really hard to establish this ISO standard. So when we're talking different adhesives and when we're talking different manufacturers, we make sure that we are always talking apples to apples. So that way, when we talk, there isn't variation, because there can be a lot of variation if the test is not performed the exact same way. So like I said, I had the opportunity to test a lot of these, and I spent an embarrassing amount of time in the basement at Ultradent testing all kinds of adhesives and testing what happens when you contaminate them with saliva, and what happens when you contaminate it with blood, and what happens when you put more than one button on a tooth, and what happens, what are the bond strengths to both enamel and to dentin. And I just spent a ton of time down in the basement there when I wasn't practicing, and I learned an awful lot, and I'm hoping to share some of that with you tonight. So
Dr. Best,
I'm
going to interject here.
Please do. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Two quick questions. One is, won't the thickness of the dentin sample affect the MPA?
It could, but when the teeth are embedded in acrylic, we make sure that we have plenty of dentin back in the tooth. So when the tooth is broken, we really are testing that strength of the dentin. There's lots of ways that you could try and play games with these tests, but I assure you that everything that we're doing, we're trying to eliminate as many variables as we can. So we're not trying to play games. We're not trying to trick anybody. We are genuinely trying to find real and true answers. So I'm hoping that answers that question.
Okay, and then the other question was, what are your views on Ceramir cement strength?
So that's an advanced question, and an advanced question that I would get into if we were going to talk cementing crowns. I will say that I like Ceramir, and I think that that's a great product. And then I'm just going to move on from that, because I feel like that question is diving off in another direction in crown cementation strength. And that's really not what I'm talking about tonight. Tonight, what I'm talking about is the bond strength of the composite to the adhesive, which I would imagine the person that asked that question would say, well, that is in fact what I'm asking. But with a crown, it's a little bit different, because you are also adding in the mechanical retention of the walls standing up and the crown coming off, which is a different subject. So I hope that that's a fair answer to that. And whoever asked me that question, if they want to talk more, I would welcome an email or a phone call. I'd be happy to discuss that. So I hope that answers that. So this is Scotch-Bond Universal, and probably the most common adhesive used in the United States. And this is their marketing. I pulled this right off of this web page so you can see. And essentially what they are saying is that if you use Scotch-Bond Universal, and if you use it correctly, you can expect somewhere in the 22 to 27, 28 MPa range to enamel, and you can expect somewhere in the 25 to 36, 37 range on dentin. And one of the things that you'll notice with manufacturers is what manufacturers do when they are showing their adhesive strengths. They always show their adhesive, and then they pick a couple of other adhesives that are just slightly lower than theirs, which I think is interesting because it really suggests that most adhesives are really pretty close when it comes to bond strengths. And I'm hoping that what you're going to see tonight by the time we finish is that you're going to see that bond strengths vary pretty wildly across the board. They are not very similar. Some of them are miles apart. So I wanted to test and see what Scotch Bond Universal did in my own hands. And so I took 7 specimens to Denton and 7 specimens to enamel, and I got the instructions out for Scotch Bond Universal, and I followed their instructions exactly as they say on their instructions. And what you'll see is the numbers that I got, I averaged just shy of 36 MPa to Denton and just shy of, well, just over 31 MPa in enamel. So if we go back and look, I was definitely on the high end with their Denton and definitely on the high end with their enamel. So my opinion is Scotch Bond could increase those numbers a little bit and say, hey, our adhesive is a little better than what we are showing. I graduated from Loma Linda University in 2002, and when I was attending dental school there, the adhesive that was available on the clinic floor was Clearfill SE2. And when I graduated from dental school in OTU in 2002, I came back to South Jordan, Utah. This is my home, and I started a practice from scratch. And when I did that, I bet you can guess which adhesive I used. And of course, I used Clearfill SE because that was the adhesive that I used in dental school. I was very comfortable with it. I knew how it worked. So well, all these years later, I thought, well, I want to test it and see what numbers I get. So the 7 specimens to Denton, I averaged 35, and 7 specimens to enamel, I averaged 19. Now, a couple other things I want you to notice. Number one, when you look at my Denton numbers, you're going to see some pretty big variation. And when you look at my enamel numbers, you're going to see some pretty big variation. And I think it's important that all of us understand that when we're looking at the numbers of what we can expect in MPa from these various adhesives, they are averages. So if you use Clearfill SE, you're not going to get 35 MPa. You're going to average 35 MPa to Denton. So I think that's an important point and one that I hope that you'll really pay attention to in all of my numbers tonight. So one of the reasons that I stopped using Clearfill SE is I looked at their instructions. And one of the things that it says on their instructions is it says if there's a possibility of resin spreading over uncut enamel, that you need to selective etch. And I was not selective etching, and I did not recognize that this was in the instructions until I did this research project at Ultradent. And reading this, I can't think of clinically really any time when I would be placing a composite where I was 100% sure that I was not going to be spreading over uncut enamel. The only time I can think that would be the case would be a crown prep. And so this is an important point to understand, specifically with Clearfill SE, but also with many other adhesives. I will really encourage you, and I'm always encouraging dentists, get the instructions out, read them, get online, read the instructions for the products that you're using so you understand them. And don't be like me and make these mistakes where you're doing things where we're not following the instructions. Here's another adhesive I wanted to test. This is G-Bond, made by GC America, and I pulled this right off of the website. And one of the things that G-Bond, their claim to fame is no post-op sensitivity. And the way that they claim that is by not fully removing the smear layer off of cut dentin. And when they do that, if you imagine not fully removing or solubilizing the smear layer, leaving that smear layer on, you would think, well, then I would be bonding to that smear layer, not to clean dentin that has either had the smear layer solubilized or completely removed by phosphoric acid. And you can imagine what that would do to bond strengths. So I looked at their website, and you can see they say to Denton, you can expect somewhere around 20 MPa if you're bonding to moist Denton, and somewhere in the 20 MPa if you're bonding to enamel. So I took 7 specimens of Denton and 7 specimens of enamel, and sure enough, right about 20 MPa. And if you remember the other adhesives that we've talked about so far and compare those numbers, G-Bond has a bond strength that is significantly lower in Denton. The other thing I want you to notice with G-Bond is that their bond strengths to enamel are higher than their bond strengths are to Denton, which is highly unusual. Almost all adhesives on the market that I tested, and almost all adhesives on the market, in their marketing, you will see that bond strengths to Denton are almost always higher than enamel. And that is in direct contradiction to what a lot of our old instructors from dental school taught us. Our old instructors from dental school taught us that bond strengths are higher to enamel than they are to Denton. And that may have been true many, many years ago when adhesive dentistry first started coming on the market. But today, that is not true. Almost all adhesives on the market have stronger bonds to Denton than they do to enamel. So another one I tested was OptiBond Solo Plus. This product is made by Kerr, and this product has the second highest bond strengths to enamel that I found. So here's my numbers. If you look at the enamel numbers, 46 to average to enamel and 50 to Denton. And if we go back and you think about that 20 or so MPa with G-Bond, you're getting over 2 times the bond strength. So if you're going to do a mandibular incisor and you've got that incisal edge, where so many of us dentists have a hard time keeping restorations in place, well, what adhesive do you want to use? And what kind of bond strengths are you going to get to that enamel if you're using, say, OptiBond Solo Plus versus a G-Bond? You're going to get over 2 times the bond strength if you simply use OptiBond Solo Plus and follow their instructions versus using another product. And my point tonight is not to slam on any product, but to just show you these are the numbers, and numbers don't lie. Here's another product made by Kerr. This is OptiBond XTR, and this product has the second highest bond strengths to Denton that I found. So here's 7 specimens to Denton and 7 specimens to enamel. And if you look at this bond strength to Denton, 54, we're closing in on 3 times the bond strength of G-Bond to Denton if you simply use OptiBond XTR. I think that this is a fantastic product. And like I said, second highest bond strengths to Denton that I found on any of the 20 adhesives that I used. And just in case anyone's wondering, I'm going to provide you all of my numbers for the 20 adhesives that I chose. I will show those to you tonight, and I'm hoping that Catapult will make those available to everyone, and I'm happy to email them to you as well. So this is Peak Universal Bond, and this is the adhesive that Ultradent makes. And so I took 7 specimens of Denton and 7 specimens of enamel, and this is in their self-etch. So with Peak Universal Bond, you can use it in one of 2 ways. You can use it as a self-etch adhesive, or you can use it as a total etch adhesive. And so I tested it both ways. And this is the highest average bond strength to using any adhesive out there that I found in self-etch mode. So I used their self-etch product, their self-etch acid, to etch the tooth, and then blew that off, and then applied the adhesive on, and this is my average. If I use total etch, phosphoric acid, 35% phosphoric acid, this is the highest bond strengths I got to enamel than any other adhesive out there. So to me, in my office, if I'm trying to bond a mandibular incisor and I'm extremely concerned about bond strengths, guess which adhesive am I going to use? Am I going to use a G-Bond, which is going to give me in the 20 range? Am I going to use a Scotch Bond that's going to give me in the 25, 26 range? Or am I going to use Peak Universal Bond that's going to give me 52, which is, significantly higher, and is going to increase the chance of me being successful and keeping my restorations in place. So I talked a little bit about this before. This is Ultra Etch. This is 35% phosphoric acid, and the pH is very low. In the 1960s or the 1950s, when Bjornkor, or however you pronounce his name, started this adhesive dentistry, etch was 85% phosphoric acid. And because of that, back then, the concern in dentistry was to make sure that you never allowed phosphoric acid to be on the dentin. Since then, we've come a long way, and we have learned an awful lot, and Ultradent has done an awful lot with Ultra Etch. All those years ago, Dr. Fisher spent an awful lot of time with this. And one of the things that he has done with Ultra Etch is that he has put silica in it, which minimizes the depth that that etch can get inside the dentin. And so it averages between 1 and 2 micron depth of etching into the dentin, and that's really important. Now, when you look at Peak SE, this is their self-etch. So you would use one or the other of these. And one of the things that you'll see with Peak SE is the pH is 1.2. Now, most SEs on the market are between 1.9 and 2.5 pH. And if you remember that pH scale is logarithmic, that will give you a sense of just how much more acidic that Peak SE primer is than many primers that are on the market. And by making it more acidic, you're going to solubilize that smear layer a lot better, which is going to increase your ability to get better adhesive bond strengths. And that's one of the reasons why Peak Universal Bond is so successful, is because of that. So here's a little study that's out there showing you that a smear layer is typically between 1 and 2 microns. I misspoke earlier. It's 1.2 microns is the average etch depth of Ultradent's Ultra Etch. And another interesting thing with this study is it said that smear plugs can be between 1 and 10 millimeters deep. And that's not a typo. That really is what that study says. And that's pretty wild to me if you think about how deep that is in teeth. But our main concern is removing this smear layer that is 1 to 2 microns deep and being able to really adhere, because that's where our strength comes from, is adhering to that dentin layer. It's not so much getting down inside those dentinal tubules. So here's a quick recap of the ones that I've talked about. I'm going to give you all of my numbers tonight, but if you look at this chart here, look at the difference between the dentin bond strength of, say, a Scotch Bond, which is a great product, by the way. But if you compare that bonding to dentin to, say, Peak SE, using Peak Universal Bond, using their self-etch, you're going to get nearly twice the bond strength using Peak Universal Bond, using their self-etch, than you would with, say, a Scotch Bond, and 3 times more bond strength to dentin than you would with G-Bond. And also with enamel, if you look at it, look at Clearfill SE coming in at under 20, and compare that to, say, OptiBond Solo at 46, or Peak Universal Bond under a total etch, which is 52. Again, you're going to get 2.5, closing in on 3 times the bond strength. So my point in talking about this is to show you that the product that you use, it matters, and it's going to have a very big impact on how much bond strength you can expect, and that's going to have a massive impact on the dentistry that you're performing in your office, and how long you can expect that to last before it finds a way to undergo forces that are greater than this and are going to knock that off. One of the things that I find very interesting is cost of adhesives. We all know that adhesives are extremely expensive. But one of the things that I think that many dentists don't understand, and I did not understand until I looked at this, is that I would have thought that cost would have been associated with bond strength. And what I have discovered is that that is not correct. And I think this is really interesting. So I went to just my Shine catalog, and I went to Ultradent's catalog, and I tried very hard to compare apples to apples. So I looked at just the bottles. I didn't look at the kits. and just made sure that I was just comparing 1 milliliter of the adhesive to 1 milliliter of the adhesive, not tips, not not a whole bunch of DAP and dishes, not all that other stuff, but just the adhesive. And what I find fascinating here is here you have OptiBond XTR, which is the second highest bond strength to Denton, and it's one of the lower costs. And yet OptiBond Solo, made by Kerr, the same company, has the highest cost for the second highest bond strength to enamel. So the reason I show you this is to make sure that we as dentists understand if we pay more, that doesn't mean that we're buying higher bond strengths. I don't know how dental manufacturers come up with these costs, how they're choosing to charge for these adhesives, but it is not bond strength, and I think that that's really important for us to recognize and to think about as we're making purchases.
Dr. Best, we have a few more questions in the queue.
Perfect.
Now is a good time.
Okay. Absolutely, fire away.
Okay. Particle abrasion or sandblasting has shown to increase bond strengths to dentin. Do you have any comments on this?
I do believe that that is the case. I think that it's relatively a small increase in bond strength. And one of the things that we can definitely talk about is all of the other things that have impact on bond strength. And tonight, my focus is to talk just about the adhesives. Absolutely, there are all kinds of other things that impact bond strength, and I'm not suggesting that those things don't matter. They absolutely do matter, but that's not the purpose of my discussion tonight, if that makes sense.
Okay, next, what is the effect of chewing forces and temperature variations on bond strength over time?
So again, variations, there's a million variables when it comes to bond strengths and how they're going to impact things, and temperature and pressure and all of those things, and masticatory forces and acid that gets poured on teeth and all of those things. And all of those things matter. But in order to do the testing that I've done, I've done everything I can to eliminate all of those other variables and test just the adhesive strength. So when I'm talking about this, I'm only talking about if you use this product, this is the strength that you're going to get. For sure, occlusion matters. For sure, patient hygiene matters. All of those things. If you have bruxism, it matters. All of those things matter, but that's not the point of my testing.
Okay, and one attendee would like you to share your technique for building or stacking a composite restoration for minimal shrinkage.
Excellent. So tonight I'm going to go over the steps in placing the adhesive, and I'll talk a little bit about placing the composite as I go. And hopefully I'll answer that question as I switch gears and start to talk about technique and less about the adhesive. So hang tight on that. I'm hoping I cover it. And if I get to the end and if I don't answer it sufficiently, please chime back in so I can hit that one. Do we have more?
Okay, the last question, and attendee, I apologize if I'm not understanding. There's a couple of questions from an attendee asking something to the effect of comparing prime and bond active versus elect, but I'm not sure that I'm understanding the question. So attendee, if you could just maybe elaborate on that a bit more, I would appreciate that.
Okay, so my guess is that you're wanting to compare those two different products, and I tested 20, and I'm going to give you all of the tests that I've done so you can see all of my numbers. What I will say is most manufacturers that I have found, when I compare my numbers to their numbers, just like I showed you with Scotch Bond, most manufacturers are pretty honest about the bond strengths that you can expect. They're not always really forthcoming with those bond strengths. Sometimes you have to dig for them to find like what kind of bond strength can I expect in MPA, but I think that that's a really important thing. So if you want to know any adhesive that's out there, what kind of bond strengths can I expect? I would encourage you to go to the manufacturer, start digging through their materials and see if you can find a chart like I showed you with Scotch Bond, and they'll usually compare theirs to a couple of others that are just slightly lower. But look at those MPAs that you can expect with that adhesive, and then bring it back to the charting that I'm going to show you tonight that is going to show you the big variation, not the small variation. And that will hopefully give you that answer to those two specific adhesives. So one of the things that I always think, if I were an attendee and I was listening to someone like me lecture, I could understand how I would, if the roles were reversed, how I would think, this guy, he's getting paid by Ultradent and he worked for Ultradent for 17 years and he's just in their pocket. And if you have that opinion, then that's fine. My encouragement to you, if you think I'm just full of it, then I would encourage you, anytime you are bonding to dentin, I would encourage you to use OptiBond XTR if you're not willing to use PEEK, because that is the second highest bond strength to dentin that I can find. And anytime you are bonding an incisal edge and you are very concerned about that restoration staying there, then I would highly advise that you use OptiBond Solo Plus if you don't want to use PEEK Universal Bond, because that is the second highest bond strength to enamel that I found. So here you have two fantastic products, the second place products, both of them made by Kerr. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Hopefully I'm doing okay on time. Oh, I might get spillover a little bit. I always do this. So there is the material, and that is part of it, but there is also the technique, what we do and the way that we handle these materials, and it matters. So we're going to talk about that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is wet bonding. And when we talk about wet bonding, the goal with our adhesives is we want our tooth to be completely saturated with water with no water standing on the top. So in this specimen that you can see the portion of the tooth that is completely saturated with water. And then you can see the portion of the tooth that has water standing on the top with the little bits of bubbles that are standing on the top. Almost all adhesives on the market today are ethanol based. And if your adhesive is ethanol based, then you want to bond to the tooth when it is completely saturated with no water standing on the top. So you can think of it like this. You're walking down the beach and a wave rolls in, you have water come up, covers up your teeth and your feet and your ankles. The water rolls back out and you get that little sheen of water that stays on top of the sand. And if the wave stays out long enough, then eventually all of that water will get absorbed into the sand. The sand is completely saturated with water, but there's no standing water on the top. That's when you want to bond. Now, clinically speaking, that can be difficult to achieve. So one of the best ways to achieve that is just a good blast of air with your air water syringe to blow the water off the top, but don't sit there and continue to blow. If you're trying to blow it off and you're like, shh, you're going to over dry your dentin. And when you do that, you cause all of those collagen fibrils to collapse, and then you don't get as high of bond strength. So really think about that when you're placing, right before you place your adhesive, completely saturated, no standing water on the top. When you look at this slide, here's an SCM of dentin. You can see all of those collagen fibrils. Think of them like little pieces of rebar. And when you're putting the adhesive on dentin, you want to burnish that adhesive in there. You want to really scrub and try and force that adhesive down into all of those collagen fibrils. When you're placing it on enamel, you don't want to burnish, you just want to paint. Now, if you're doing an MO on 31 and your patient can open, has an opening distance of 1 inch, then that's a real challenge. And I understand that. It is very different to work on a tabletop than it is clinically speaking, but do your best. But if you can think about this, you really want to burnish on dentin and you want to just paint it on enamel. Another important point is when you place adhesive on the tooth, you want to place enough adhesive on the tooth that the entire prep is covered the whole time. So here in this photo, you'll see this is an example of not enough adhesive. You need to have more adhesive so the entire preparation is covered the entire time for the correct amount of time. This is a really important point. I'm going to show you, I think I said earlier, Lisa, I didn't have any videos, but I do have this one video. I hope it plays okay. But what I want you to see is that you're going to see me blowing air, and then you're going to see me touch my air water syringe on the patient bib, and you're going to see that some little water droplets come out after I touch. See that water? That is a source of contamination, and I discovered this after getting some crazy numbers on my bond strength tests, and I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. So when you're seeing a patient clinically, blow the water off of the tooth. You have the dentin completely saturated with water, no standing water on the top. Place your adhesive, burnish on dentin, paint on enamel. Now, when you bring your air water syringe in to thin that adhesive and dry that adhesive, before you do it, start blowing air and just touch your patient bib for just a couple of seconds and cause a vortex in the end of that air water syringe tip and get all of that water out so you don't contaminate your specimen with water. This will have a major impact on your dentistry and can make your bond strengths go up. Another thing that you need to understand is that the solvent, the ethanol or the acetone in a few cases, but mostly ethanol, you need that ethanol to evaporate out of the adhesive. So you're going to place your adhesive on the tooth, you're going to burnish on the dentin, you're going to paint on enamel, and then you're going to bring your air water syringe after you've touched it on your patient bib while you're blowing to get the water out of your air water syringe tip. You're going to come straight in at your prep and you're going to thin that adhesive until it all thins out. It wants to be 12 microns thick. So if you're watching in your loops, you'll start blowing and it'll move and you'll see it move and then it'll stop moving. At that point, when it stops moving, that's that 12 micron thickness that you want. Now pull your air water syringe back and continue to blow air across the top of your preparation. That thinning and drying stage, that should take about 10 seconds. You need to allow time for that ethanol to evaporate off the top so your bond strengths will stay as high as they can. Peak Universal Bond comes in a couple of different ways. One, you can buy it in a syringe and the other is in a bottle. The reason I like the syringe is because that way you don't get evaporation of that ethanol solvent by taking the cap off. Another thing that you want to be cognizant of is making sure that your resin, your adhesive is not put out too early, because as soon as you put that adhesive into a dapping dish from the bottle or however you're going to apply it, that ethanol immediately begins to evaporate. And as it evaporates, your bond strengths are going to go down. So you want to make sure that you are getting that adhesive from the bottle or from the syringe and getting it on the tooth immediately. One thing that I sometimes, when I'm giving this presentation afterwards, I'll have people come up to me and they're so confused about, phosphoric acid or the SE with Peak Universal Bond. It is critical that you understand, if you're going to use Peak Universal Bond, you have to use either the Peak SE or the total etch, and you have to follow the manufacturer's instructions on this, but it's one or the other. And you can do selective etch if you want. I did some testing on that, which I'm not going to share tonight, and that's another subject, but you need to use either the self etch or the total etch with the Peak Universal Bond. So you always use the Peak Universal Bond. That's the adhesive, and then you need to etch the tooth with either total etch, 35% phosphoric acid, or the self etch. So here's our steps for bonding technique with self etch, and I can send this slide or these steps to anybody. Hopefully, you can just take a quick picture with your phone of the screen for a second. But here's your steps. I'm not going to read them to you, but this is the steps for self etch, and then here are the steps for total etch. And it's important that we follow these steps exactly. Again, I'm gonna pound on that. Make sure that you're looking at manufacturer's instructions. Get those instructions out, read them, make sure that you understand them, get online, look at them, and make sure that you're following them exactly. So we're going to do one together here, and we're going to go step by step. And Lisa, I told you I don't have videos, and I have videos. My apologies. Hopefully they're all going to work. So you're going to you have your specimen, and you're going to place your self etch on the tooth. As you place that self etch, what you want to do is place that acid on the tooth, and then you want to agitate it. Move it around. Keep fresh acid moving and getting on that tooth for the full 20 seconds as you're placing that on there. If you're going to place phosphoric acid, you can just place that 35% phosphoric acid on the tooth and just let it sit. And it's acidic enough that you don't need to stir it. But with the self etch, you need to make sure that you're stirring it, getting fresh acid to that tooth all the time. Number two, make sure that you're using enough adhesive. I mentioned this before, but it's absolutely critical. If you're using Peak Universal Bond, you're going to place that adhesive, you're going to put the adhesive, and you're going to put it on the tooth for 10 seconds. As you put the adhesive on the tooth for 10 seconds, make sure that the entire preparation is covered for 10 seconds. Once you place that adhesive on the tooth, you're going to burnish onto dentin and you're going to paint on enamel. If you're going to use the syringe, that little red and spiral brush tip, the end of it should be bending a little bit because you're really scrubbing on that dentin. You're burnishing it in and you're painting on enamel for that full 10 seconds. Make sure that you are exact with your time. So many of us dentists, we're very busy. And we're doing a restoration in one room and we're jumping and doing a hygiene check and we got another patient coming in and we're pushing fast and we have to be quick. And I understand that. That is definitely the case at my office. But your 10 seconds, your 20 seconds, your 15 seconds, it needs to be exact. So if you have a tendency to count super quick, then get yourself an Alexa and say, Alexa, give me 10 seconds or whatever. The other thing that you can do is make sure that you're counting, but 10 seconds is 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. It is not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you're not exact with your time, if you're too quick, your bond strengths are going to go down and you're not going to get those numbers that the product that you're using has the potential to deliver because you're cheating it by going too fast. I'm going to give you an example here of thinning and drying. So I've placed my adhesive. I'm going to take my air water syringe tip. I'm going to touch it on my patient bib. Now I'm going to come in straight at my adhesive and I'm going to blow that adhesive until it thins out. You'll see it kind of stop moving in the center. Once I do that, now I'm going to pull my air water syringe back and I'm going to continue to blow air across it and let that ethanol evaporate off the top. Sometimes I'll do these, I'll do a hands-on course with dentists. And when I see dentists thinning their adhesive, one of the biggest things that dentists do is they wave back and forth. And you don't want to do that. If you wave back and forth, even more so than you can see on my slide here, what you'll do is you'll create a thick spot and a thin spot, and a thick spot and a thin spot. You're creating waves in your adhesive, and that you don't want to do that because that thick spot of adhesive is not going to have as high a bond strength. Now, clinically speaking, one thing that will help is if you'll put your high volume suction next to your preparation. So you pull off that volume, especially down in a box like an MO or a DO. You want to put your high volume or have your assistant put your high volume suction down there to pull the bulk of that adhesive out. So that way, when you're thinning it and you're drying it, it wants to spread to that 12 micron thickness and you can get that pool of adhesive that's in the bottom of your box. You've got to get that out of there because if you have a big, thick layer of adhesive that's pooled in the bottom of your box, you're going to have definitely lower bond strengths there. Then you want to make sure that you use a quality light. There's lots of quality lights on the market. Here's Velo by Ultranet, a quality light, but you want to make sure that you're using a quality light and you're getting it as close to the adhesive as possible and that you're curing for the full 10 seconds. That is absolutely critical. And we could talk for an hour, hour and a half on lights and the importance of lights. And it is critical. You cannot cheat this. If you cheat this step, your bond strengths will go down. Now, here's one specimen. This is the highest bond strength that I ever got to dentin with any adhesive on the market. It's 90 MPa. It's the highest one I ever got. And if you look at it, I'm super proud of this. And it was probably sheer luck that I got it. But I'm super proud of it because it's a 90. That's higher than the DEJ is attached. So just a fantastic bond, and it went really well. Here's another one that I got using Peak Universal Bond, using the exact same thing. But what I want you to notice is I got 90 using one product, and I got a 30. Well, what's the difference? If you look really close at where the composite broke off, what you'll see is you'll see voids. You can see those little bubbles where the composite broke off, where it sheared from the adhesive, and you can see bubbles. And the reason that I got a 30 and not a higher number is because I've trapped air in between my composite and my adhesive. And when you do that, you don't have the surface area and your bond strengths are going to go down. It is not possible for me to overstate this importance. When you are placing a composite against an adhesive, a flowable composite is about the only way you are going to get complete adaptation between your composite and your adhesive that you've placed on your tooth. And when you place that flowable composite, you want that flowable to composite to be 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter thick. And you want that to be over the entire surface of the entire preparation. Anywhere where you do not have flowable, it takes a very long time to sit there and pack and vibrate that paste or packable composite and try and get adaptation between your composite and your adhesive. And clinically speaking, none of us have time to do that. So flowable composite immediately against your cured adhesive, put your flowable in there and then cure that. That's the only way you're going to get those high bond strengths. So here's the handout that I'm going to provide for everybody. I think Catapult will provide it. If not, shoot me an email anytime. I'll send this off to you. Here's the 20 adhesives that I used. Here's the first page, and here's the second page. I'm happy to give all of these numbers to you. No tricks, no hiding anything. These are the numbers of the 20 adhesives that I used. Here's Prime and Bond. That somebody was asking about. Hopefully this gives you the numbers. And again, there's so many adhesives on the market, and to do these tests just takes it takes a lot of time. So I tested these 20, but again, if you're not sure, or if I didn't test your composite, if I didn't test your adhesive, what I would recommend that you do is start looking and see if you can find in MPA the product that you use and see how it compares, and then start looking at what other product that you would consider using, whether it's Peak Universal Bond or OptiBond XTR or OptiBond Solo Plus, whatever you're going to use, compare it to that and look at what those numbers are and what you can expect. So that's going to wrap it up for me. Hopefully, let's see. I did okay. I'm maybe a couple minutes past where I was hoping to be with time. But again, this is my email and this is my Instagram. I would welcome questions. I really do want to help dentists do the very best dentistry they can do. So please reach out to me and ask me any questions. And for sure, I'll take questions now if there are some questions.
Yes, we do have a few in the queue here. So I will just
Perfect.
Go down the list. Okay. Do MDPs make a difference in all these products?
So they can, and one of the things that I find really interesting is that we as dentists, we really have no way of knowing or testing this. Like as a practicing dentist, working 4 days a week at my office, I have no way of testing this. And so when you start talking about individual portions of the recipe, things that go into the adhesive, when people are asking, oh, if it has to have MTA, and it has to have MDP, or it has to have whatever the ingredient is, that really is us falling prey to marketing that's out there. The manufacturers telling us, oh, if you have this molecule in it, you're going to get higher bond strengths. And the truth is I don't really care what they put in the product. I want to see what are the highest bond strengths I can get. So when it comes to any particular product or any particular molecule or any particular thing that's in the recipe, I don't really care what it is. I'm specifically looking at what are the bond strengths. And I think it's important for us to recognize that that's marketing working on us, telling us, oh, it has to have MDP. So I don't really ascribe to any particular chemistry that's in it. I'm just specifically looking at the bond strength.
All right. Next is, have you done any research on total etch in the 2-bottle systems like All-Bond 2 or similar systems?
So again, I have given you all 20 adhesives that I tested, and you can see all of my numbers. And again, I'll recommend that you look at those numbers and look at the manufacturer. If I didn't test your specific adhesive, look at the manufacturer, find the number of bond strength in MPA that it gets, and compare and look at what you can expect from that product.
Is Peak product radio opaque?
That is a great question. One thing I will say is, well, two things. Number one, I don't know. And number two, it is 1.2 microns thick when you place it. So a human hair is 40 microns thick. So you're talking about 1/10 of a human hair. You're not going to be able to see that on an x-ray. So whether it's radio opaque or not, that is indifferent. If you can see space in between your tooth and your composite, you are not looking at your adhesive layer, you are looking at a void. So hopefully that answers that question fairly.
Why would you not use small inverted cone burr to cut a couple of retented grooves into dentin to help hold the corner of your Brooks lower central incisor?
Um, I'm not opposed to that. And I think that that is really good thinking. And that is an experienced dentist talking, because he or she has had composite failures. So again, this lecture, my presentation is not about prep design. It's not about all of the other variables. My presentation tonight is specifically talking about adhesive strengths that you can expect from various adhesives on the market and how you can place them to get the highest bond strengths out there. And even if you do cut retentive grooves in your incisal edges or elsewhere to increase your strength and allow mechanical retention to help, in my opinion, I only see advantage from higher bond strengths with the adhesive. I see no advantage in having lower bond strengths, whether you're cutting retentive grooves for your composites or not.
Okay, moving on. Do you apply a desensitizer before your adhesive? If yes, how long do you leave it on the tooth?
So I don't apply a desensitizing agent. And the reason that I don't is I in my office, I do not have a very big problem at all with sensitivity. In my opinion, if dentists are having issues with sensitivity after they place composites, the number one thing that they are doing is they are over drying the dentin. They are blowing on the dentin before they place their adhesive, and they're causing a collapse of those collagen fibrils. And as those collagen fibrils collapse, it doesn't allow the ethanol, the solvent in the adhesive, to chase that water out of those collagen fibrils and get in there. And so if you over dry and you collapse those collagen fibrils, then you place your adhesive on the top and you get a gap, you get air that is trapped in between your adhesive and the tooth. And I believe that that is the number one cause of sensitivity under restorations. Not long ago, I have a sister-in-law that lives in Atlanta. She went to a dentist. She had a bunch of fillings done. They were absolutely killing her. They were so sensitive. I started asking, she called me on the phone. She had questions. And my first question was the dentist really blowing, making sure it was dry? And she told me that the dentist reported that they had to keep everything so dry. And so she flew out. I redid the restorations and the sensitivity went away. Now, that's an anecdotal story, and maybe that's not the problem. Maybe that's not the reason why those restorations were sensitive. But I do believe that that is the number one cause of sensitivity in dentistry when it comes to composites. I don't believe it's anything else. So, not that I'm opposed to desensitizing agents. If you want to place one on, I'm fine with that.
Do you suggest to cure flowable resin before packable resin goes on top of it?
I think that that's a great question. I think the number one concern that I have with that is making sure that whatever your composite is that you're using and your flowable is that you're using, that you don't go beyond the increment size that is recommended with curing. So in my practice, I place my adhesive, I thin it, I dry it, I cure it. Then I place flowable composite, 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter thick, and I cure it. And then I put a little more flowable, and then I put my packable in, and I kind of do that snowplow technique in each of the steps moving forward, because I hate it when I get bubbles in between my composite. And they don't, you can't get a cavity in there, you can't get decay in there, but it looks ugly on my x-rays, and I don't like that. So a little bit of flowable in between each of the layers helps me to avoid bubbles getting trapped in between the composite. But that's my number one concern, is that I don't want to go beyond the increment depth that is recommended by whichever packable composite and flowable composite that you're using.
Okay, and I might just take a couple more here.
Okay.
see. When there is blood and saliva contamination after applying bond, do you recommend re-etching and re-rinsing? And how would that affect bond strength?
100% yes. If you ever have the chance to come spend an hour and a half with me, I will show you some tests that I did with this exact thing. I took some specimens, I placed my adhesive, and I was gross, and I took a little saliva spit and I put it on my sample and I tested it. The other thing that I did is I placed my adhesive and then I poked myself and made myself bleed, and I used that. And what I found is saliva is really bad for bond strings. It makes them drop, and blood is worse. Blood is death to your adhesives and your bond strength. So if you get contamination once you've placed your adhesive and it's contaminated with blood, saliva, or anything else, you need to back up. You need to re-etch, reapply your adhesive, go through all of those steps again. That is the only way to clear and clean that contamination off. That's not that the other questions haven't been great, but that's such an important question. All of these questions are really important, but that one, contamination will kill your dentistry. So.
Okay, and someone is asking about the superoxyl affect bond strength?
I don't know the answer to that one, and so I'm hesitant to give an answer because I don't want it to be wrong. But I'm going to look into that, and whoever this is, email me. Let's talk, and I will do a little studying. I'm not knowledgeable enough about that to answer. I'm sorry. I can work on it though, and I can get the answer for you.
Okay. I'll just take one. Folks, I know we're gonna cut this short. There are quite a few other questions in the queue, Dr. Best, but
Email me after. Email me after. Let's have a
yeah.
conversation. I'd love to help.
Okay. Really quick last question. Somebody is
Okay.
asking, where is the picture on the screen taken from?
Oh, this picture. That's a great question. So I'm from Utah. I live in Utah, and this is called the Wave. And this is right on the Utah-Arizona line. And I've hiked to this a couple of times. This is a fantastic hike. You have to apply and get a permit to go on this hike, but just an absolute wonderful hike. If you have not been to Utah, come see us. We've got some of the most beautiful scenery in the whole world. All of the places that I've traveled, I absolutely love Utah because we've got some of the best hiking and skiing and snowmobiling and lakes. We've got some amazing stuff. So if you get a chance, Arizona technically gets to claim this one, but the trailhead's in Utah. So that's a great question. A big thank you to Catapult for letting me participate. What a wonderful opportunity. Thank you.